The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is out in theaters, prequel to the Hunger Games movies and books, based on a prequel novel from Suzanne Collins herself. This one stars Rachel Zegler, Tom Blythe, Viola Davis, Jason Schwartzman, Hunter Schafer, and Peter Dinklage. The story takes place decades before the original movies during the 10th annual Hunger Games. Because the event has been getting somewhat stale, the game makers decide to try and find ways to improve it, to make it more interesting and engaging for the Capital audiences. And one of those ways is to take some of the top students of the Capital Academy, including Coriolanus Snow, who would later become the president and main villain of the original series, and have them be mentors for the tributes. But things become complicated when Snow gets assigned Lucy Gray, a charismatic and beautiful singer who immediately steals away his heart. So I'm told by the people online that read the book that it was really good, maybe even the best of the bunch, but I'm sad to say it doesn't necessarily translate to a good movie. Apparently, a big part of the novel's narrative was Snow's internal monologue, giving an insight into the hypocrisies and his sort of twisted way of thinking. The movie suffers because it doesn't have that, but also because it feels at the same time too long and too short. Too long because there are long stretches of time when nothing interesting happens and you just sort of wait for it to end, especially in the rather weak final act. But too short because it feels some of its aspects are underdeveloped, particularly all of the stuff that happens after the games are concluded, which in turn makes the eventual turn to bad from Snow come too quickly and too suddenly. Interestingly enough, many people have criticized splitting the final part of the original trilogy into two movies, and the director himself, Francis Lawrence, who also made this one, came out later saying he regrets that decision. He should have just made a single film out of it, and that was a mistake on his part. And I think, in trying to rectify that mistake, he didn't make that decision here. Perhaps it's also that the studio wasn't brave enough to commit to two movies straight away without first seeing how the first one would do. But I think this one would have probably worked better as two movies or as a sort of limited series on TV. The production and costume design is pretty good, as it always has been, but on the other hand, the cinematography feels much safer and unimpressive than in previous movies. It lacks that same grit and dirty texture on it, and especially the very first film was shot in a way that made it seem sort of desperate and frantic, whereas here it mostly seems too polished and clean and too reliant on CGI instead of practical effects. There's also one moment, the climax of the games, which has Rachel Zegler sing a song, and in the movie, an orchestral score builds up as she does that, and I just thought, man, it would have been so much more powerful and haunting and fitting the scene if it was just her singing a cappella, essentially as that's what happens in the movie. The score is just for us, for the audience. And I thought this was one example of filmmaking choices that make me think the movie had potential to be way better in the hands of a better director. And also, for how brutal and violent some of the deaths are, it is ridiculous how there is almost no blood in the film. Like, someone will run a blade through another's throat, and there is no blood visible at all. It feels weirdly sanitized, and I didn't like that at all. I will say the performances are okay. I especially liked Hunter Schafer, Jason Schwartzman, who's great as comic relief, and Peter Dinklage. Viola Davis is also here, dialing it up to 11 and chewing through the entire scenery. And I wasn't crazy for that, but I suspect many people will find it entertaining. Overall, I found it rather disappointing. I think there is an interesting story to tell here, but in translating it to the film medium, a lot of it was lost, and what remains is poorly paced, rather average at best.